Hello, friends. Tattooed Biker here with you. Welcome back to Weird Wednesdays, and tonight we will explore the mysteries of the afterlife. Get ready for some goosebumps as we dive into four bone-chilling true stories sent in by our incredible viewers, from haunted houses to encounters with creepy apparitions. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about the paranormal. So grab your EMF readers and let's ride into the paranormal. Number 1. Dear Biker, let me preface this story and just say that I've witnessed strange and unusual things since I was little. I'm currently 27 now, and I was much more open to it when I was younger. And I can tune it in or out, but have myself distanced at this time. The experience was one of the most profound supernatural experiences I've had, and something I still think about. Back in 2010, my family relocated and moved to a home in Arizona. At this time of the story, I'm around 14. The home was built in the 80s, with sort of a strange floor plan, and only had one previous owner. From what the neighbors told us, an elderly couple had lived there before. The wife passed a few years ago, and the husband had lived there alone after that. The neighbors said as he got older, he was going a little senile, digging holes in the yard and coming up with strange projects, like putting out globs of rock and cement in the yard. He was moved to an old folks' home and passed away shortly after. And that's when my family moved in. Right off the bat, I felt that the home had a strange energy. As I mentioned, it had a strange floor plan. The dining room was in the center, sort of walled off into a circle. When you walked in the front door, my parents' room was off to the right. Then, continuing around the circle, you would be in the living room, then kitchen, and then you'd be facing an office. And right there was a wing that went down the hallway to my room and my brother's room. From above the house, it looked like a lollipop. I hope that helps visualize it better. We started renovations pretty quickly after moving in. Painting, cleaning, ripping things out in the backyard. We found a large human tooth in the bathroom drawer one day. Weird and gross, but I've heard about spiritual ties to human teeth, so I wanted to throw that in there. For some reason, whenever I think about the house, I always think of that tooth. While living in the house, I always had the feeling of being watched. There were strange noises, an eerie feeling, and when walking around the circle, I always felt like someone was right behind me. We all felt sort of creeped out in the home, but nothing serious had ever really happened until one night. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and heard someone, in boots it sounded like, running around the house. It sounded like they were doing laps around the circular dining room. I thought this was odd, and I sat up in bed. I slept with my door open, and across the hall I could see my brother in his room still sleeping. My parents slept with talk radio on all night every night. Strange, I know. And I could hear the radio on the other side of the house and could hear my dad snoring. These footsteps sounded heavy, and didn't think it could be from my mom. Mentally, I was ruling out that it was anyone in my family making the noise. The stomping continued, and I was getting concerned. My dog typically slept in the office on the couch. I thought to myself, if he starts barking, then I'll get worried. Right after thinking that, I heard the footsteps run into the office and papers start rustling around. And then my dog starts growling and barking. The paper stops and my dog stops, and it's all quiet for a moment. I thought that it was over, until I hear the footsteps running down the hallway towards my room. I'm completely frozen, believing that I'm about to be met by either a spirit or an intruder. My door is to the left of me, still open. As the footsteps come closer and get louder, they suddenly stop right before where my doorway starts. I just sat there, frozen, waiting for someone to peer their head around the corner or something. But nothing ever happened. It all went silent after that. The whole scenario lasted maybe 3 minutes. The next morning, I confronted my mom. I asked her if she had been running around the house in boots. She laughed and told me no, that I must have been dreaming. She told me that her and my dad were in their room all night. I started to maybe think I'd imagined it. A week later, she told me she wanted to talk. She didn't want to scare me at the time, but told me that night she had heard it too. The footsteps, my dog barking, the papers rustling, everything. She said that she was about to get up and check, also worried that it might be an intruder, but it had come to a stop. All doors were locked that night, and nothing was stolen or left ajar. And we lived in an extremely safe town. Both her and I believe it was a spirit, likely the old man who lived in the house before us. We continued to feel watched and could feel a strange, passive-aggressive presence, but never experienced something to this capacity ever again. We still talk about the experience from time to time, and I'm glad I wasn't the only one who was awake in my house that night to hear it. A few years later, we had moved out, and strangely, a friend of mine had moved in. When I found out he lived in the house, I asked him if he felt a strange presence or had ever had anything happen to him there. His dad and him both looked at me, wide-eyed, and told me that yes, they felt it too. It was interesting to know that someone else felt it in that house, and it wasn't just my family. Thanks, Biker. Signed, Katie. Number 2. Dear TB, I wanted to share my story. You can use my name if you want. In October of 2017, I lost my husband while 7 weeks pregnant. The day he died, I left to work in a hurry. We shared some text after he woke up about a phone interview he had later in the day and about him having some pain in his leg, and then a quick phone call a few hours later to tell me he was running to the pharmacy for pain meds. I attempted several calls about an hour later to make sure he made it home safe, but there was no answer, which wasn't like him. I tried calling him for hours until finally a woman answered his phone stating he was with the sheriff's department and asked me to come home. At the time, I worked in a prison, and out of fear that he had gotten in some sort of trouble, I left my post, got to my car, and sped the whole 30-minute drive back to town. Upon turning into our parking garage, I see a large white van that read Coroner. As I walked up to our home, I was greeted by the same lady on the phone, blocking my view into our home, who let me know my husband had suffered a heart attack, later confirmed as a pulmonary embolism, explaining the leg pain he had mentioned the morning of his death. Apparently, my husband made it back home and into the house and locked the security door before collapsing from the heart attack. He screamed for help. Our neighbor and her son heard and ran over, but they couldn't get into the house due to all of the doors and windows being locked. The son later apologized for not just breaking a window and stated due to the shock and panic, he lost all sense of reason. They were able to talk to him through the door while he called 911, but unfortunately, he stopped responding a few moments before help arrived, and he was pronounced DOA. A week or so after his service, his best friend's wife offered a cleansing and card reading by my mom. Although I was skeptical at the moment, I was desperate for any kind of communication with him or closure. She mentioned a lot of things in the reading, but the most prominent for me was that he was currently in a strange after-death state, where the soul relives its whole life. She compared it to when people say their life flashes before their eyes. She said it was a place every soul visits after death as a way to reflect on the life they had lived and the person they were. She told me his death was so sudden that he hadn't realized he had died yet, and I would need to help him cross over. She said she felt that I was the one that would help him, and instructed me to light white candles and a jar of water to guide him to peace. Fast forward to a few months later, and I moved into my parents' house. I was lying on the couch and started to feel very heavy, as if I'd been administered anesthesia. It was definitely some type of sleep paralysis that I was feeling. When I could finally open my eyes, I was still laying on the couch in my parents' room, except my husband was sitting on a chair right in front of me, as clear and as real as he was before he had died. Before I could speak, he began telling me he was nervous for his phone interview, the one he was supposed to have the day he passed away. He told me he was excited and hopeful he'd get the job and wanted help preparing for it. I looked at him with pain and tears, and he began repeatedly to ask me what was wrong. I apologized. "Baby, I'm so sorry. Do you remember the pain you had in your leg? You had blood clots. One made its way to your heart. You aren't going to make it to the interview, baby. You died." I will never forget the look on his face. It was a long period of confusion that turned into realization. I apologized again, told him I loved him, and begged him to respond, but he just sat there with a strange look on his face. I immediately woke up. The chair from my parents' kitchen table now sat right in front of me, empty. I never dreamed of him after that. I pray it's because I gave him the closure he needed to cross over. We have a 5-year-old son now, who dreams very specific dreams about his dad. He wakes up talking about things that he couldn't possibly know unless it came straight from his father. Losing my husband was my first real experience with death, but it brought me peace to have my own bit of confirmation that there is something more after this life. Thanks for reading. Signed, Rosalind. Number 3. Hey TB, I have a story I wanted to share. When I was about 3 years old or so, my family was looking for a bigger house to move into. We looked through houses, and at one point we visited a house, and I saw a man in the bedroom. And my family stopped taking me house hunting because turns out there was no man visible to everyone else. That's not the house we moved into, but when we finally found a house and started moving things into it, my mom and sister told me this story as I got older. They were packing things into the kitchen, and I was playing around the house. I run into the kitchen and ask my mom, "Can I play with the little boy?" She turns around to ask me, "What little boy?" I point and said, "The one that lives in this house." And she freaks out and says no. Later on, we move into the house fully, and you can assume I start playing with the little boy anyway. One day, my mom's at work in the morning, and I'm at home with my dad. I come out of my room screaming and crying. My dad finds me and asks me what happened. I tell my dad that the little boy made a scary face at me and yelled. My dad sees how distressed I am and walks to my room. He said it felt extremely cold and uncomfortable. He tells me to stay in the living room. My mom comes home soon after. She notices that I've been crying and asks my dad what happened. He tells her, and she checks in my room when she gets the sudden urge to start spraying holy water all over the place in the house. I don't think I ever saw the little boy again. I've had moments where I see a head pop out from a corner that looks like the boy. I remember very clearly what he looks like. He's a little blonde boy, around maybe 5 years old, wearing a long sleeve white shirt and a black vest. He doesn't seem bad or angry. We've noticed lights flicker around the house and just assume it's the little boy still playing. My friends will say they've seen a shadow of a little kid following my cats around the house or watching them, and we all just accept that the little boy lives here with us now. He doesn't ever bother us. We just coexist. Signed, Jenny. Number 4. Hey TB, so I work security for a 100-year-old hotel, and I've seen some strange things. For context, I'm highly skeptical, but no stranger to the paranormal. I'm the type that believe that demons exist, but most ghost stories are just overreactions or easily explained phenomena or maybe simply hoaxes. About 3 months ago, I started working security for a hotel that was built back in the 1920s by a major chain that has changed hands multiple times now and is owned by one of the biggest ones now. I'm not saying which hotel, so the company can't sue me. Now, from what I've been told, paranormal activity isn't a common occurrence at the hotel, but some years back, the Make-A-Wish Foundation started sending some children here because, well, it's a major resort at one of the most popular beaches on the East Coast, so why wouldn't they? However, the hotel wasn't informed of this and didn't realize what was happening until several children had died in their rooms over the course of a few weeks. Supposedly, on quiet nights, you can hear children playing with a ball in the North Tower. For years, guests complained of children playing ball loudly next to their rooms. Even when security would check, there would be no one there. This hasn't happened in a while, but going into this story, you should understand that my opinion on the case of what I've seen may be warped of being told this story. Now, every shift we do a floor check, especially on night shift when I work. At first, I never noticed anything strange. I got a little creeped out by the quiet of the floors at night, but nothing at all supernatural. The hotel has 2 separate towers separated by a restaurant and shopping area that connects them. About a month into the job, and suddenly I start feeling like something was following me on my floor checks, especially in the ST, which is the biggest and tallest, and where I understand most jumpers chose because all the rooms facing the ocean have sliding glass doors with a short railing in front, and you can put the rest together from there. Anyway, it got really bad in October. Maybe the spooky season had an effect on me, but this feeling of being watched and followed never went away. As the weeks have gone on, I started seeing distorted faces in windows as I passed, to the point that I no longer look at them. The floor pattern sometimes reflects on the glass, and the mind could easily make a face with the pattern, but some of these faces were up further on the glass where this shouldn't have been possible. When I focus up there sometimes, I can almost hear whispers in the back of my mind urging me to commit suicide, or lambasting me for the mistakes I've made, or even telling me insecurities I have about myself that I've never told anyone else. In the last few weeks, some strange physical and auditory phenomena have occurred. Part of what we do on floor checks is close doors that we find open, and some of the doors lately have been more difficult to close. One in particular, I had to use all my strength just to shut. The ice machines on each floor sometimes make a banging noise while in operation, so I usually attribute any noise I hear from the vending area to that, but sometimes it almost has sounded like something was rummaging in the garbage cans, and when I'd go to investigate, I'd hold my keys so they wouldn't jingle in case it was a person. And as soon as I do, the rummaging noise will stop. On a couple of occasions, I felt what I can only describe as hands touching me while closing certain doors. Just a tickle, and other times just a brush against the back of my hand. And sometimes feeling like someone on the other side of the door is pulling it in the opposite direction against me. I now dread the floor checks, especially those after 3 a.m. I'm not trying to make this seem scarier than it is, but these things intensify the closer it gets to that hour. Whatever they aren't friendly, and I think they know that I can sense them. They really don't like that I can sense them. Like some nights, that watched and followed feeling is more like a burning hatred directed at me. Like I'm being stalked by an enemy or a predator. I'm pretty religious, and whenever these things happen, I always just pray to God, and when I do, it usually goes away. The scariest thing, though, is the last time it was that intense, I heard something growl right next to my ear. I've never been hurt by them, so my assumption is they can't hurt anyone physically, but they try to communicate often and want their presence acknowledged, almost as though that's where their power comes from. My grandmother once told me that demons truly have no power. They are only capable of whatever we believe them to be capable of. My mounting fear is feeding them, whatever they are. My experience could just be me seeing things, or looking too much into something completely unexplainable. I don't know. This is just what I've seen and heard. Whatever it is hunting me at night. My coworkers don't know about it. Or at least, if they are, they aren't telling anyone. I am bipolar but medicated, and I've never had hallucinations. Maybe I'm just crazy and seeing things, but if that's the case, why am I not having any other signs of a manic episode or psychosis? And why am I only seeing things in that one part of the building? I just wanted to share. Thanks for reading. Signed, Anonymous. And there it is. All I have for tonight. Wow, weren't those stories simply mind-boggling? I don't know about you, but I've got some serious shivers down my spine just reading those spine-chilling encounters. Don't forget to comment below with your thoughts, and if you want to share your own unexplained experiences, my email is in the description. Send them, sparing no detail, and they just might make it to a future video. And for more spine-tingling, unexplained content, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.